Paul Tenorio dropped kind of a bomb. One of the big issues that separates American soccer from the rest of the world is the calendar. Big news coming out from The Athletic and Paul Tenorio. MLS considering adopting the fall to spring calendar to match European football.
Yeah. So what I think what we got from the article is that this is largely about the business of the game. And I don't even mean making money domestically, because very simply, you could argue that they will lose ticket revenue from playing games through the winter. There is talk of a 5-week break, which arrests momentum of the league. I don't know if there's a consideration for sort of an apertura clausura kind of split the way that Mexico does it, or if it would be one league season just with a Bundesliga style break. I mean, so many things are up in the air. It's kind of hard to even know how to feel completely about this idea. Uh, but this seems to be about lining up transfer windows more than anything else. The idea that MLS wants to fully engage in the worldwide transfer market, certainly with clubs in Europe, and because of the calendar here, it doesn't work. Players are unwilling to make a choice to come to MLS because the European window is open, because the season is starting. You get to bet in with a team that's just beginning a campaign rather than joining mid-season. You obviously have players who haven't been able to leave and follow a European dream because clubs are less willing to do business with MLS. MLS doesn't want to let part ways with players in the summer when those European clubs are looking for pieces. So all these things are on the table. I'm surprisingly for myself, I'm open to this idea. I am. But again, I also think that if you are somebody who goes to games on a regular basis and you live in a northern climate, this has got to be kind of like, what the hell? In fact, I'll bring this in. I was looking at Twitter X today, and an old friend of mine from soccer blogging days, Dwayne Rollins, the 24th minute or 24th minute on Twitter. Lots of people will know him. He's a Toronto FC guy. He lives in Toronto. He's been following that team from the very beginning, writing about them, talking about them. Canadian national team guy as well. He said, "You know what, MLS? Fine. Switch your calendar to winter. See how it goes. Then, when attendance crashes in the northern climates, you can switch back for good, and we never have to talk about this stupidity again." So that's a guy who lives in the Great White North saying, "Nope, this is dumb." I wonder what the split is, Robert, among the committed MLS fan base, and whether this is about them at all.
Yeah, well, this news coming out, is this actually real news, or is this an informal opinion poll, right? Like, are they taking the temperature of how everyone feels about this? I mean, for that gentleman living in Toronto, that's a whole nother level of winter. I'm in Michigan, and I think Toronto is probably, maybe a level up from us here. And I think that if they cleverly arrange, because in the article it does talk about taking a winter break, 5 weeks or so, and you talk about a split season. I think that if the end of the first half of the season, they taper off and play more southern climates at the end there, and then when they return to play at the beginning of spring, they do similar, like 2-3 match weeks where they are in the southern, so you could almost expand that to like maybe a 7-8 week window.
Yeah.
It would be difficult. Obviously, there would have to be at least some games that are in horrifically cold situations, but the national team showed the whole country and showed the world that they are not afraid to have players play in cold climates. And if the fans are truly engaged, they will fill the stadiums. They were absolutely full stadiums when they played the game in Canada, when they played the game in Minnesota. Obviously, the national team is a little different of a draw, but those fans, if they really want to dig in, then they
you're
would go.
talking about dangerous kind of conditions in Minnesota for that national team game.
Yeah,
And I
tongue in
think
cheek there.
the Canadians loved putting the Mexicans through it in Edmonton, right? I mean, and obviously Canadians are hardier folk when it comes to cold. So, for them, it's nothing. I think, look, you have to consider the impact on the quality of play. Like, you have to consider that. You can't do
That
this.
said, August summer games.
No, but that's the thing. Like, I don't know how to do this empirically, right? This is all about the eye test. This is all about subjective opinion on what's better: soccer played in frigid temperatures on rock hard surfaces or soccer played in sweltering conditions where players are just, they're melting out there, and certainly in places like Houston and Orlando and Nashville and places like that. I don't know if one is definitely better than the other, right? You can't play in snow. So if it's snowing, you better hope it stops snowing and you clear the pitch. And then, okay, is this surface good enough to play soccer on, or is it too much to play soccer on? It's not like football. Like football in cold and snowy weather is kind of cool. And yes, people can put themselves in danger. I think Kansas City fans are still thawing out from a Chiefs game where it was like ridiculous last year. I mean, I don't know, man. This is so tough because it's always been a differentiator for MLS that has been, for me, a positive. It means my soccer watching never has to stop. I've got
Right.
MLS when I don't have European football. I got European
Mhm.
football when I don't have MLS. Now you're gonna switch that. If you're talking about the big picture and trying to sell this to new fans, maybe, but selling it to old fans who are used to going through the summer, certainly MLS has moved away from the family-focused marketing, approach, but there's still lots of people who take their families out and want to go to games when kids aren't in school, who want to be able to take their kids out to the stadium, and maybe that's tougher during the winter time. I mean, there are a million different factors here that could play into this, but I will say that sort of my base instinct is that this feels like a step of maturation for Major League Soccer. It feels like joining the world in the world's game in a way that I'm not sure anything else they could do would feel. Yeah, even if they went to a single table and determined their champion by points, I would still, that is a step behind this move in terms of aligning your windows. The logistics of it make it scary.
Yes, agreed. The logistics very difficult to tackle. There'll be imperfections, but there is imperfections now. But yeah, this change, if it happens, would change, especially for the match going folks, season ticket holders. That changes their whole tradition of their experience with engaging with their team. So instead of those summer days when the kids are off, late nights in the summer going to games, those might be replaced by, maybe holiday, or even what if MLS has begins a tradition of MLS matches on Christmas Day. And we,
Ah,
we
there you
wake
go.
up and watch the English games in the morning, and then there's a full afternoon of
Uh-huh.
MLS Christmas games. So
Yeah.
there is possibilities there, and then the business end of MLS gets kind of caught up in the fall of the seasons getting colder, full swing of football, a World Series, and can kind of get lost in the mix. Instead of competing against football and the World Series, they'd
Yes.
be playing MLS Cup playoffs in the spring
Yes.
and rather completing with like the NBA, NHL in the beginning of baseball rather than
Right.
the height of sports right now.
And let's be clear that what we're talking about is more games potentially impacted by inclement weather, not like we don't have any games impacted by inclement weather now. I mean, the MLS Cup
Thunderstorms, heat,
playoffs. Well,
hurricanes.
thunderstorms, heat, yes, absolutely on the warm end. On the cold end, it actually happens because of the way the season plays out, the playoffs right now, as you mentioned. I mean, speaking of Kansas City and thawing out, 2013 is like this deep dark memory for me because I was there at what was then, I think, Livestrong's Park and is now Children's Mercy Park, freezing to death or almost freezing to death watching Sporting Kansas City beat RSL in an MLS Cup final. So, when you play, if you're not going to do away with playoffs, and that's a different discussion for a different day, but if you're not going to do away with playoffs, then you are going to risk pushing games into cold weather environments at this point in the calendar. Now, the MLS is kind of lucky if things hold in terms of the playoff bracket. They're sort of lucky that the top two teams in the West are LA teams. The top team in the East is Inter Miami. That more than likely those games are not going to be impacted by bad weather. They're going to get a showpiece game. They're going to get nice weather for that. Whoever hosts, but you do risk it. Like Columbus could have weather if they make a final and host that game. That has happened before. So, it is kind of like there is no perfect situation. It's just which choice gives you the best of as many things as you can get. In this case, I mean, do you value the transfer windows lining up more than you value a bunch of games through the summer in what would be nicer weather.
Do you think that I mean, so just like on the surface, like zooming out, the aspect of the United States soccer stepping out from the age of isolationism with
Yeah.
this calendar is exciting. To your point of the transfer windows aligning, like that, just having it not be opposite would be fantastic. I mean, teams and players reluctant to come in the summer for the reasons you pointed out. Middle of the MLS season, teams don't want to sell, and then might weigh
Yeah.
into players wanting to come. Like, I don't want to get stuck
Well,
there.
but again, and Mike Thomas said it earlier, and I don't have the comment lined up, but you know, if you do kind of play that out in your mind, right? Yeah, maybe the windows lining up means some players will be more likely to sign with MLS, but you're also going to have to sell them on the idea of playing through the winter in certain places. Like, can Toronto attract players if now they've got to play the bulk of their season from October to March? Right, where in Toronto, does it get above 40 degrees at any point during that window? Probably not very often. That is an issue in terms of selling the league to players, because now you're saying, hey, you have to play in this league in which is for some players going to be a tougher sell because it's behind a lot of European leagues, and by the way, it's going to be pretty cold when you play.
Yeah, the weather doesn't really get nice here until like May. So there's a lot of months of,
And yet you live there, and yet you choose to live. You're a Michigander or whatever you are. I can't believe it.
you're
Can't
the
believe it.
you were the army brat, and I was the automotive engineer brat.
Air Force.
Moving
Air
around.
Force. Get it right. Air Force.
What did
But
I
yes,
say?
Army.
Oh,
That's
I meant to say military. My apologies.
okay.
Military, Brad. I was dragged across the world for the automotive industry.
I see.
And we landed here. I spent time in other places, but yeah, that's fair. I mean, yeah, we do live in a place. People that live here ask themselves that all the time as well.
And now we're gonna ask players from around the world to make the same sort of choices about where they play. It is interesting. It's a big, big, big question the league is facing.
So if you were like a Colombian player on the rise, what sounds more desirable? Like Houston on a 95-degree day in August, or Toronto on a negative 10-degree day in December?
You're certainly more accustomed as a Colombian to the warmer weather, so
True.
that you may feel like that's an adaptation you can make. I mean, my wife is Puerto Rican. She grew up on the island. She moved to Northern Virginia when she was in her mid-20s. She still cannot handle any hint of cold weather. Like, if the temperature drops below 70 degrees, it's a disaster. And we need blankets, we need hand warmers, we need space heaters. And so I I think
So
that
what is Spanish for Jason? It's too cold.
demasiado frío is what that is. Yeah.
Does she have like a go-to, like, ooh?
She just steals all my stuff, like all my hoodies, everything I own that's meant to keep me a little bit warm ends up one of her layers. And I'm talking like multiple of my things end up on her at the same time as a layer. So that's where that's at.
As we talk out this calendar shift, the Mexican system is the one that's starting to make the most sense for logistics. But the gap between the aperture and the Clasera would have to be. Don't correct my pronunciations of those.
I'm not.
Um,
No, I'm not.
but I feel like that gap would have to be pretty huge. Could the American audience understand like a 2-part season like that?
No, it's so this is another selling point. Like if it's in the story, which again is so interesting. If we're talking about this from a media analysis perspective. How does this story? What is the intent of this story? And Paul Tenorio is doing his job in reporting, but is this meant as floating the idea by MLS with Nelson Rodriguez all over the story? Or is this something different? Like is MLS testing the waters or what? I don't know. That in the story, Paul reports that there would be a 5-week break. That is a long time. That's a long time. You basically tell people, forget about us. We're not around. Now, how do you keep attention? Like, that's an off season. How do you keep people's attention when you're working through that 5-week break? And again, if you are not doing Apertura Clausura, if you are doing one season, you got to remind you spend like 2 weeks educating everybody. This is where we are. in the standings. Remember, this team was in first when we stopped playing for the winter, and now we're getting back to now. They've got to try to finish this out. Those things are kind of wild to think about.
Yeah, they're talking about introducing this after the 2026 FIFA World Cup happening here, of course. It'd be interesting if they install this after. Would there be like no MLS from
Yeah,
November all the
yeah.
way until after the World Cup in August?
Don't know. I don't know. That's the thing. I have no idea. I have no idea if this would be finish the season in 2025 and not play again until after the World Cup in 2026. I don't know if it would be play half a finish the season in 2025, then play half a season starting in January, February, or play part of a season leading into the World Cup, or play an exhibition season leading into the World Cup, or play some sort of League Cup style tournament. Who knows? Who knows at this point? It would be a shift.
Yeah, this story really opens up Pandora's box. You got another?
You know what? I just remembered Russia did this. I mean, obviously Russia's, country non grata at this point, but Russia did this not that long ago, like within recent memory. So maybe we need to go back and see how they executed their shift, because they were on the calendar that we're on now, and they decided to shift to line up with Europe, because I think largely the thinking was they weren't able to do anything in UEFA competitions because their teams were on a very different schedule, which we know about because MLS always struggles against the Liga MX teams in the CONCACAF Champions Cup because of that same issue.
Yeah, the Russian league, the leaders in cold weather adaptation. We'll see. We'll have to dig into that a little bit. But have your say. Hit us up on X and Instagram, MKickaround there. Give us a follow and your opinion or another question. This story just brings out a million questions. Or write us an email, morningkickaround@gmail.com. And of course, hit the subscribe button on Morning Kick Around. We blasted the doors down on our 300 follower goal or supporter goal, whatever they call it, on subscriber. My apologies. The subscriber goal of 300, well on our way to 50,000.